started na ko. Financial asset at fair value. So, let's begin with the definition of an investment. According to IASB or International Accounting Standards, investments are assets, basically assets. So, it could be a current asset or a non-current asset. Depende kung unsa siya kadugay bago ma-realize. Of course, we already know na if it could be realized for a year or less or 12 months or less, then it's a current asset. But if it is expected to remain in our financial statement for a longer period of time or more than 1 year, then it is a non-current asset. So investments are assets held by an entity for, first, remember this one, accretion of wealth. So, it could be through interest, dividends, royalties, and rentals. So, pag mayroong tag-wealth, di ba parang yaman? So, accretion or accumulation, you want to increase, gusto ka nga mudako ang imuhang wealth, then investment could be a good asset. Also, it is for capital appreciation. One good example of this if you invest in land because land is the only asset na hindi nagde-depreciate. So, if you want to invest in land, then your purpose is for capital appreciation. Then again, that is an investment. Or for other benefits to the investing entities such as those obtained through trading relationships. So kung ano man yung trading, we are going to discuss that later. But boiling it down, investment is actually your one way of making use of your asset. Of course, di ba? I think I mentioned this during the discussion that we had in the financial statements or in cash, na hindi maganda sa financial statement ng company na masyadong malaki ang cash. Okay? Bakit, ma'am? Because it could be viewed na wala nila na maximize pag-ayo ang potential sa ilahang cash. So you just have to put certain amount or you just have to maintain a certain amount of cash using your liquidity ratios that you are going to encounter sometime soon. So, enough cash lang na mo cover sa imuhang current liabilities. Ayan, to be specific. And then the rest of the cash, pwede na nimo siya patubuon. How? You're going to invest it. So, if you think na kailangan nimo ang cash very soon, then i-invest lang nimo siya sa current na mga investments like trading securities. That's one example of a current investment. Or if you think naman na hindi mo masyadong kailangan yung cash for the next few years, then pwede nimo siya i-invest into non-current investments. Like you could invest it in bonds, you could invest it in a subsidiary, in an associate. So things like that. The thing there is dili matulog ang imuhang cash. 'Di ba? It's like you have money and then imo lang gibutang sa bank, 'di ba? In the minds of those people who are investment associates, investment tawag ani kanang mga dasig kaayo sa investment, sabi pa nila na wag mong ilalagay ang pera mo sa bank kasi matutulog lang, hindi mo mapapakinabangan ang passage of time. So instead of putting your money or letting your money sleep in the bank, then why not invest it in stocks, invest it in foreign exchange and things like that. The thing there is investment para hindi matulog ang money. But actually, investment, according to IASB or in accounting parlance, is actually for first, accretion of wealth. We have for capital appreciation and for obtaining trading relationships. But actually, if we're going to chop it in smaller pieces, we also have other reasons or purposes why do we invest. So we already mentioned about accretion of wealth, capital appreciation. Well, one purpose of investment is also to have control or ownership in a certain company. So, example of these are subsidiaries and associates. So, if you are buying a certain share in a company, let's say 15% or 50%, so you already have that control in the company. So, kung mupalit ka sa company o balit 20% sa ilahang shares, you have that significant influence. That means nga pwede na ka nga na-I voice in the management. Okay? Which we are going to discuss in detail sa mga succeeding na mga chapters. And also, if you're going to purchase mga, let's say, 60% of the company's share, then, of course, more than half, that means na anak kay control sa kumpanya. So, you don't just exercise what do you call this? You don't just exercise a voice in the management, but also you could control the corporation or the company itself. Kasi ang laki na ng investment mo doon sa kanila. It's as if ikaw na ang tag-iya sa kumpanya. So that's one purpose of investment. If, especially if you are investing in the shares of the company, or you are purchasing a certain portion of the shares that the company is offering. Also for meeting business requirements. So an example of this is a sinking fund. We have preference share, redemption fund, plant expansion. So these are sometimes requirements bago tayo makautang. Ayan. So before ta maka-loan sa bank, sasabihin ni bank na kailangan na akay sinking fund na buhaton. So from time to time, kailangan ka magbutang og money dito as a fund para at the end of the contract, at the end of the line, secured me nga naakay gilahi or naakay pundo pambayad sa amo ang utang. So that could be a requirement of our loan in a certain bank or some other business transaction. So may mga ganyang kondisyon. And also for protection when we talk about investment in assurance. So these are the purposes of investments, and we have here some types or examples of investments. Trading securities for financial asset at fair value through P&L, which we are going to discuss in this chapter. And also these financial assets through OCI. And non-trading equity securities, we're going to discuss that as well. And the rest of these. But first and foremost, what is a financial asset? Because we nakalagay dito, di ba? Financial asset at. So, ano ba yung financial asset? So, the standard further defines what a financial asset is. Financial asset is any asset that is first cash, a contractual right to receive cash, a contractual right to exchange financial instrument with another that are potentially favorable in the company, and also an equity instrument of another entity. So we have here examples of financial assets. First thing first, cash is a financial asset. Kasi sabi ni standard, ang definition ng financial asset is first cash. So, dili na ta makiglalis ana. Cash is a financial asset. Why? Mayroon magutong financial asset if at the end of the line, pwede nato siya i-exchange into something nga naatay mapakinabangan in return. So in our society, the medium of exchange is cash. If you buy, you give cash. If you exercise or if you enjoy a certain service, like sakay ba ka sa jeep, you pay cash. Or nagskwela ka, you pay cash. So every transaction that is happening in our society, cash should be there. Kung wala kay cash, lisod kayo ka makakaon, lisod ka mabuhi. So, if you have cash, then you could have anything, almost anything that you need or anything that you want. So, you have this exchange of something in the market which brings you to the favorable side. Okay? So, magbibigay ka ng cash, makukuha mo yung gusto mo. Magbibigay ka ng cash, pwede kang ihatid ng driver kung saan mo gusto. Magbibigay ka ng cash, pwede mo makain ang gusto mo. So, wala tayong problema sa cash, that's a financial asset. But there are also other things that are considered as financial asset. We also have here our receivables. Why? Because this gives us the right, that's the definition letter B, the right to receive cash. Okay? Natay receivable, unsa gani nang receivable, di ba utang man sa ato ang customers or sa ato ang clients, sa atoa or some other people nga naay utang sa atoa. That means in our mind naatay singlonon, and if that is our singlonon, then that is our right and we are on the favorable side. Okay? Pag may putag financial liability, dito po sa pikas nga bahin, naa siya liability na mubayad og cash sa atoa. Kita, naatay right nga mudawat og cash gikan sa iyaha. So that is a financial asset. And also, it is further stated here that a deposit of cash, kanatong deposit sa bank, is also considered a financial asset. Why? Because the bank, di ba pag maingon ta og deposit atong gibilin sa bank, and we have the right nga pag ato tong i-withdraw, makadawat ta og cash. Okay? We have the contractual right to receive cash from the bank. Hindi pwedeng nag-deposit tayo ng cash, pag mag-withdraw ta, hatagan ta niya og baka. So, hindi po pwede yon. Cash talagang bibigay ni bank. But it further states that a gold bullion, okay, a bar of gold, deposited in a bank is not a financial asset because hindi naman po pera ang gold. So, dili pwede nga, nag-deposit ka dito og gold, tapos, pag gusto ka mo withdraw og kwarta, hatagan ka nilang kwarta, hindi po. Kasi gold nga ang dineposit mo. So, kung may withdrawin ka man sa kanila, gold din, hindi pera. Okay? Unless, okay, mong gibaligya ang gold sa ilaha, so na-convert na siya into cash. Pero kung unsay mong gi-deposit dito, yun lang din ang makukuha mo. And then, since we are talking about right to receive cash, hindi naman cash ang marireceive mo pag nag-deposit ka ng gold sa bank, then that is not a financial asset. That is not a medium of exchange. Instead, that is a commodity. So, we also have here some assets that are not considered as financial assets. So, kato nga mga asset nga wala tay right to receive cash. For example, your intangible assets. We also have your PPE. So, intangible assets mo na itong assets nga di na ito magunitan. For example, trademark, patent, copyright, di ba? Just because nakasulat ka og kanta, does that mean nga na kay right to receive cash? Wala. Unless imo nang mabaligya. But what if I am composing a song, and then, oh, ayan, may na-compose na ako, meron na akong right to receive cash. Wala pong ganun na nangyayari. Okay? Hindi siya katulad ni receivable. O, ayan, pautangin kita ha, may receivable na ako sa'yo. So, the moment na pinautang kita, I already have the right to receive cash from you the moment na mag-due ang imuhang utang. But on the intangible side, just because may na-invent ka na bago, okay, na-invent na sabay, time machine, okay, then imo nang ipapatent, then that does not give you the right to receive cash. Sa imuha lang, mapangalan sa imuha. But eventually, you will receive cash if you are going to enter into contracts. But the thing there na ginawa mo pa lang, wala kang right to receive cash. The same goes with your PPE. Just because may factory ka, that does not mean that you have the right to receive cash. Gagamitin mo lang yung PPE, yung factory, yung machine mo para sa operation. Pero wala kay mapaninglan nga muhatag sa imuha og cash. Ganun lang naman yun eh. The thing there about financial asset is naa kay mapaninglan nga muhatag sa imuha og cash or some other asset na favorable on your part. Just because na kay PPE, that doesn't mean nga pwede na kang maningil kay like kahit kanino, nabigyan ka ng cash. The same goes with your prepaid expenses. So, nagbayad ka og rent good for 5 months. Dili man cash imuhang right to receive, but the exercise or the enjoyment of the property. So, kintahay, nagbayad ko din hiya sa ako ang boarding house og rent for 3 months. Then, hindi pwedeng, ay, nagbayad na ko na ako'y right to receive cash. Hindi. I just have the right to enjoy the property. So, that is future economic benefit. And that doesn't make it a financial asset. So, the same goes with some other prepaid expenses and also our leased assets. So, kasama na din yun sa leased asset katong rent nga akong giingon ka ganina. So, kadto lang ha, boiling it down, financial assets are those assets na we have the right to ask someone or to oblige someone to give us cash or any other financial asset that will make us on the favorable side. An example of that also is an equity instrument. So, classification of financial assets. So we have here 3 classifications. We have financial asset at fair value through P&L, through OCI, and also financial assets at amortized cost. So maybe some of the items here medyo murag malibog ta later, pero just bear in mind na you are the entity here nga nag-invest. Okay? Ikaw ang entity nga nag-invest, so you have this asset. Dili ikaw tong entity nga gi-investan. Okay? Unya na dito na sa liabilities nato ma-encounter. But as of this moment, our point of view is we are the investors. Now, the classification depends on how do we use or what is our purpose of investing on such financial assets, or that's what we call the business model. We have first to realize fair value changes, and second is to hold contractual cash flows. So, ang classification sa imong financial asset depende kung unsay imong purpose nganong nag-invest ka ana nga asset. So, kung ang imong purpose is to realize fair value changes, so gusto lang nimo dula-dulaan ang market, like kung mutaas ang presyo, gusto nimo ibaligya. Kung mo barato, palit ka, buy and sell, like what we are doing in the stock exchange. So kung kana lang ang imong business model, ingana lang nimo pag-manage ang imong financial asset, or in that way lang nimo gusto maka-earn og profits sa imong financial asset, then you could put that asset into the first or second qualification. Pwedeng financial asset at fair value through P&L or financial asset through OCI. Pwede. Pero kung ang imuhang purpose sa imuhang pag-invest is the second one, to invest in order to collect contractual cash flows. So, gusto lang ka nga maningil, magsige lang kag paningil dito sa kumpanya kung asa nimo gi-invest, then you could choose the second or the third. Okay? OCI or financial asset at amortized cost. So, depende yan. But there are also assets or investments na sinabi ni standard kung asa gyud siya dapat ibutang. So, dili siya kay depende, kundi it is a requirement by the standard na dun talaga ang classification niya. So, bear that in mind ha. So, we have 3 classifications, pero magdepende ang kung asa nato siya ibutang, depende kung unsa ato ang purpose or business model sa pag-manage sa kana nga investment. So, before we go further, let's have a definition of an equity security. This is an example of financial asset, right? Equity instrument. So, an equity security encompasses any instrument representing ownership shares and right, warrants, or options to acquire or dispose ownership shares at a fixed or determinable price. Simply put, mauni ang atoang investment in a company nga atong gipalitan og shares. So, pwede ordinary shares, preference shares, naabatay rights or options. Right means you have the right to purchase shares. Options means naa kay option to purchase shares. So, dali lang. Basta when it talks about shares of the company, kung dito gani ka mag-invest sa ilahang shares, we call it equity securities. Ma'am, napadailaing pamaagi nga mag-invest sa company? Yes, pwede nimo sila pautangon. Okay? And we call that bond investment, which we are going to discuss in the next pa na mga lessons. So, naiduha ka pamaagi para maka-invest ka sa company. First, palit ka sa ilahang shares. Sa gani ng ordinary shares, preference shares, sa gani ng shares, di ba mao man na ang katong ownership sa company? Kung sa partnership, we have partners capital. In a corporation, we have shares, right? So, balikan nato si FAR. Muna akong ginaingon na kung wala ta nakasabot sa previous na mga accounting subjects, maglisod yun ta. But I'm sure, I hope na inyo pa tong na-remember. So, going back, The shares of the company represent the ownership of the corporation. So, pwede ta mo palit sa ilahang shares and we call it equity security or investment in shares. Pwede ingana. Pero, pwede pod nga, ato lang sila nga pautangon. Kasi ayaw natin ng long-term or very long-term na connection sa kumpanya. So, gusto lang ta nga, o sige pa, utangan lang tika, and then you just have to pay me for the next 10 years or 5 years, and then wala na dayon tayo transaction, wala na dayon tayo connection, then pwede din. Investment in bonds din yon. Or, kung gusto tag dugay-dugay nga investment, kasi as long as the corporation lives, naagin na siya shares. Buhi yun na iyahang shareholders equity. So, kung gusto ta makinabang sa corporation for a very, very long time, as long as it lives, pwede tang mag-invest sa ilahang shares. But of course, pwede nimo na i-withdraw. In case na di nakagusto, pwede naman siyang i-withdraw. Okay, so that is what we call equity security. Okay, so andun yun siya. Yung mga sinabi ko, andun lang din. So, a share of the ownership, interest, or right of a shareholder in an entity. And this share is evidenced by an instrument called share certificate. So, pag nag-invest tayo or bumili tayo ng share in the company, bibigyan tayo ng share certificate. Actually, to make this analysis easier, mura lang ka og shareholder nga nipalit og share. Kaya lang, hindi ka tao. You are another company purchasing the share of or shares of another company. Okay? Ka-remember mo sa ato ang concept sa corporation accounting, ikaw si shareholder, na ay nipalit nga shares, di ba hatagan man nimog ordinary shares, debit, cash, then credit ordinary shares, kay nipalit si shareholder and everything. The same goes din hika. So ang ato ang point of view, kita si shareholder. And the larger point of view is, dili ta tao. Okay, we are not natural persons here, but we are artificial persons. So, we are the company. Usa ta ka kumpanya nga nipalit og shares sa usa na pod ka kumpanya. So, ganun lang. Shareholder pa rin naman ang tawag sa atin. Di ba wala naman siya sa code or sa revised corporation code na bawal mo palit, bawal mahimong shareholder ang usa ka natural person? Di ba pwede man? Pwede man gani mahimong incorporator? Corporator pa ba? Di ba? So, we are just a corporator or a shareholder here. On the other hand, we also have this debt security. So, mauna nito kung ingon ka ganina that you could invest in a company by bonds or by utang. So, let's say si corporation naghatag or nag-issue og bonds. So, kanang bonds, murag hapon na siya shares. Kaso, utang lang yon. So, pag nag-issue siya ng bonds, pwede nato na paliton nga bonds and then pautangon nato siya og kwarta. So, we now have the bonds and then the company has our money already which they are going to pay sa mga musunod na mga periods or na mga tuig. And we call it investment in bonds. And that is a debt security. An example of debt security. Ang shares, nag-issue og share ang company, mupalit ta, na nasa ato ilahang share in the form of share certificate, and then gibayaran nato. So, pwede ta makinabang through dividends or, dividends. And eventually, pag nag-liquidate na ang company, napuntay share sa ilahang asset. Bonds, on the other hand, pwede ta makinabang through interest, of course, kasi pinautang natin sila, and also payment of principal. So, pwede installment. Most of the time, installment naman yan siya eh. So, that way, mabawi na to hinahinay ang atong gipautang. So, that is investment in debt or it's a debt security. So, we have examples here, corporate bonds. Yung, kung unsa to kong gi-explain ka ganina, that's an example of corporate bonds. We also have BSP treasury bills. These are like, more siya bonds, but more on short term and Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas ang nagbigay. So, ibig sabihin, nangutang si Bangko Sentral sa atoa or willing siya nga muhiram sa ato ang money, pero iyahang bayaran og very soon. Yes po.
Ay, masunod, ma'am.
Ay, ayan, Kuiko. Sorry. Maminay mo sulod, 8:42. Sige, ayan. Thank you. Sige, proceed ta. Where am I? We also have government security. So, the same bonds, commercial gihapog bonds, kaso si government ang nag-issue. Commercial papers, and the rest. Ay, ang dami pala nila. Ayan. Ay, napaday gihapon. Sorry. Ayan. Thank you. And we also have the preference shares with mandatory redemption date or are redeemable at the option of the holder. So, balikan natin si equity securities. Sabi dito, equity securities do not include redeemable preference shares. Treasury shares and convertible debt, of course. Hindi naman talaga kasali si treasury shares. So, unsa dining redeemable preference share? Unsa gani ng preference share? It's like an ordinary share. It's a share. Okay? The end of the line, it's a share. Kaya lang, pag abot sa dividends or sa assets, na sila preference. Ibig sabihin, mauuna sila. Pero what if butangan na itong word nga redeemable preference share? Okay? That means nga, kana nga preference share, pwede na i-buyback, paliton og balik sa corporation nga nag-issue. And that's why it is called redeemable. Okay? So, kung ang preference share redeemable, pwede ra di paliton og balik ni corporation, then ang ato ang purpose nga mag-invest sa share sa company, I mean mo palit og share sa company kay para naatay ownership for a long period of time, pwede ma-defeat ang kana nga purpose. Nga naman, pwede man niya i-redeem o like 5 years from now or 3 years from now, pwede niya i-buy back ang share. If that's the case, hindi tayo magiging owner for a very, very long time dito sa corporation, which is our purpose unta nganong nipalita og share. So that is why when we talk about equity securities, it does not include redeemable preference share. Kasi nga, mawawala din sa atin eventually yung share na yon kasi bibilhin ng company, i-redeem ni company. So, unsa din yung redeemable preference share? It is actually a debt security. Preference shares with mandatory redemption date or are redeemable at the option of the holder are included in the definition of debt security. So just because it's a share, it doesn't mean that it is equity instrument, but it is a debt security. So, nganong debt utang man ma'am? Sabi niya pa, at the option of the holder. Okay. Ingani. Ako ang investor. Ako sa ha. And then, kamo ang corporation nga nag-issue og shares. Kung nag-issue mo og shares, let's say ordinary, and then nipalit ko, okay, sige, bibili ako kasi marami akong pera, nakatiwangwang lang. So, gamitin ko naman paminsan-minsan para hindi naman masayang. So, bibilhin ko yung shares, ordinary shares na ino-offer nyo in the market. So, bili ako. Ayan. So, pag nipalit ko sa inyong shares, I am partly an owner of your corporation, right? So, owner na ko sa inyo ha. So, my purpose is, dyan muna yung pera ko. Dyan muna. Anyway, ano naman yan siya eh? Spare money. Dami ko kasing money. So, dara lang na siya. And then, for the next few years, makadawat ko dividend. So, happy ang life. Now, let's say, nag-offer po mo og preference shares. Redeemable preference shares. So, ayan, may money na naman ako. Bibili na naman ako. So, bibili ako ng redeemable preference shares na ino-offer ng company nyo. Pagbili ko niyan, of course, nakalagay, redeemable. So, sabi ko, kailan nyo i-redeem? Tapos, sasabihin nyo, i-redeem namin, ma'am, after 5 years. So, ay, sayang, dapat, for the rest of my life, mag-i-invest sana ako sa company nyo. Pero, sige na lang, bilhin ko. So, bumili ako ng redeemable preference share. After 5 years, kailangan yung bilhin sa akin or kailangan yung i-redeem ulit ang preference share na binili ko. Ibig sabihin, on your part, at the end of 5 years, naamoy liability nga paliton og balik ang kadto nga share kasi you promised, di ba? You promised na after 5 years inyong i-redeem. So wala na ko ilabot kung naamoy kwarta or wala, basta at the end of 5 years kailangan ninyo paliton og balik sa ako. So okay lang sa ako, at least nanapod ko'y kwarta at the end of 5 years. So for me, hindi po siya equity, debt, kasi may utang kayo sa akin. So, investment in debt security ko yon. So, sabi naman dito, preference shares with mandatory redemption date, that's an example, or are redeemable at the option of the holder. So, i-change na to. Nanapod mo yung preference shares, redeemable gihapon. So, sabi ko, kailan nyo i-redeem? Tapos, sinabi nyo, actually, ma'am, ikaw po ang bahala kung kailan nyo gustong ibenta ulit sa amin. Basta kung inyuhan na siyang ibalik sa amo siyang paliton. So, yun yung sabi nyo. Sabi ko, sige. So, binili ko. And then, di ba, itong sabot anytime at my option. Ako yung holder, di ba? Ako yung holder ng preference share. After 3 years, medyo nagkalugi-lugi ang company. Sabi ko, balik ko na tong preference share para mabayaran niya na ako. So, pagbalik ko ng preference share, you have the obligation to pay me or you have the obligation to buy it back from me. Kasi yun yung napag-usapan natin based sa contract. Na anytime, kung kailan ko gusto, pag ibalik ko na, bibilhin nyo or babayaran nyo. So, I have the money. Again, that is a debt security. So, kuha to kung unsa ang redeemable preference share and kung unsa nang ginaingon nga at the option of the holder. Okay? So, boiling it down, it's a debt security, hindi equity. Now, how do we measure financial assets? So, just like the other assets, we have fair value. But specifically here, fair value plus transaction cost. Kung ang imuhang investment or financial asset is not at fair value through P&L. So, kung at fair value through P&L, ayaw na paglibog-libog, fair value yun na siya. Wala na yung plus, transaction cost, wala na yung minus, wala na yung plus. If your financial asset is at fair value through P&L or profit or loss, ayaw nagkalibog, fair value. Walay plus, walay minus. Unsay mahitabo sa transaction cost, ma'am? Diretso expense. Now, what if financial asset at fair value through OCI or amortized cost, etc. Basta, other items aside from fair value through P&L plus transaction cost yun. Okay? So, that's the easiest way of explaining unsang initial measurement. Actually, the fair value there is also what we call the transaction price. Kung ano talaga yung price, the moment nga nagsabot mo, the moment nga nagdraft mo sa contract, or that the value according to the transaction that you entered into. So, yun. Kung ano yun, yun yung fair value. Kung ano yung price na napag-usapan, yun yung fair value. Okay? So, kung ano yung price na in-offer, tsaka in-accept, perfection of the contract, yun yung fair value. Huwag mo nang pahirapan sarili mo. Okay? Yung mga transaction costs, like yung mga charge, etc. So again, pwedeng i-capitalize, pwede ding expense agad. However, if the financial asset is held for trading, or if the financial asset is fair value through P&L, expensed outright. Yun yung sinabi ko kanina, diretso expense. So, ito yung mga examples ng transaction costs, mga fees, mga service charge, mga binayad mo sa attorney mo, nagpa-notarize kayo, mga taxes, at iba pa. Okay? However, it does not include premiums or discounts. Okay? Yan yung mga i-discuss natin later. Di kasali doon. Interest kasi itong premiums tsaka discounts. Ito yung mga imputed interest, yung mga implied or nakatagong interest. That's the initial measurement. Subsequent measurement, however, could be either of the three. Okay, pili ka lang kung fair value through profit or loss ba, fair value through OCI, or amortized cost. Initially, fair value or fair value plus transaction cost. But subsequent measurement after 1 year or if mag-prepare na kasi mong financial statement at the end of the year, imo na siyang i-remeasure. And it could be, hindi siya remeasure, pero i-assess nimo kung unsa ang iyahang updated na amount or carrying amount to be specific. Pwedeng FVPL, FVOCI, or amortized cost. Either dili pwede nga ang isa ka investment i-measure nimo sa kaninga tulo. Dili. Naragyo na siya isa ka balay. So, ano po tong mga to? So, we have here, financial asset at fair value through P&L. So, unsa man ang mga financial assets na pwede natong i-measure sa FVP&L. First, held for trading. Held for trading investments or trading securities to be specific. Mao ni sila ang kanang nagdula-dula lang ka sa market like what I've mentioned kaganina. Naghulat lang ka og mga fair value changes. Imo bang ibaligya, imo bang ipalit? Have you heard that kind of trading in our stock exchange? Ganun din 'yon. So for example, bumili ako ng stocks ni Jollibee. Tapos akong purpose lang sa iya is actually hindi ko naman talaga gustong maging owner ng Jollibee. So, hindi siya equity investment. So, bumili lang ako ng stocks, tapos maghulat lang ko kung kanus musaka ang iyahang price or fair value. Ako na pong ibaligya. Tapos, mupalit na pud ko laing stocks, let's say, sa Metro Bank. And then, maghulat na pud ko musaka, and ako na pong ibaligya. So, it's like you're playing in the stock market. So, ingana. So, I think some of you here are students of mine in economics or macroeconomics, di ba? So, although hindi natin na-discuss in detail kung ano yung galawan ng stock market, pero ganun din yun. Bibili, tapos ibebenta ulit, bibili, benta ulit, bibili, benta. Maghulat lang yung ka kung kanus ka makatsyempo nga makaginansya ka, saka ka mo palit or mo baligya. So, if that is your business model, so kung kana lang yun yung purpose sa pagpalit og stocks, you call that investment held for trading or trading securities. If that is the case, the standard says it is a requirement to put it or to classify it or to measure it at fair value through profit or loss. Wala kang option na mag-OCI, wala kang option na mag-amortize cost. Requirement ng standard yon na ilalagay sa profit or loss. So, kung requirement, si standard nagsabi, sundin mo yon. Next, all other investments, quoted equity investments or instruments, pwede mong ilagay sa fair value through P&L. Sinabi din yun ni standards pero hindi yun ang requirement, kundi consequence lang ng transaction. Other assets irrevocably designated. So, ibig sabihin nito, ikaw mismo ang nag-designate. So, sabi ni standard, ito, financial asset na to, hindi naman siya trading, pwede mo siyang ilagay sa OCI, pwede mo ding ilagay sa amortized cost. Sabi mo, ay, gusto ko talagang ilagay sa P&L, irrevocably at my option. Pwede rin. Okay? And ang tawag mo dyan, financial asset at fair value by irrevocable designation or by option. Hindi sinabi ng standards, ikaw ang nagbuot. Pwede din yun. Okay. This fair value option is applicable to investment in bonds or other debt instruments. Pwede yung mga utang. Okay. Investment mo na utang ng kabilang company which can be irrevocably designated at FVPL, even if pwede naman siyang ilagay dun sa ibang classification. So, pwede din. Now, all debt investments that do not satisfy the other two, so tawag dito is by default. So, if you have your debt investment, so yung mga ininvest mo na utang ng kabilang company, medyo naglibog ka, unsa man, pwede ba na ko siya ibutang sa OCI? Wala kasing sinabi si standard. Pwede ko ba siyang ilagay sa amortized cost? Wala kasing sinabi ni standard. So, kung hindi naman siya pwedeng ilagay dito or parang feeling mo walang sinabi si standard na kailangan ilagay sa OCI or amortized cost, ilagay mo na lang sa FVPL. Yan yung pinaka-safe na place sa mga investment na wala ka kabalugasan ni mo ibutang. So, by default, ilagay mo siya sa P&L. Okay? So, unsa lang man ang kailangan nato timan-an? Actually, kailangan timan-an tanan. But what is most important here is kaning trading securities. It is always P&L. And it will never be part of OCI or amortized cost. So, ano ba tong held for trading financial assets? So, muna to kung gingon ka ganina, selling or repurchasing it in the near term. So, mo lang to siya imuhang principal purpose, buy, sell of the security. Okay? So, it's a derivative. So, mura kag pusta, murag ana ba, pustanay lang. So, it's a derivative, except for a derivative that is a financial guarantee or designated and effective hedging instrument, which we are going to discuss in the future, derivatives. Pero, I think nakuha nyo naman yung point kung ano yung trading securities based sa ako ang explain kaganina. And these are normally current asset. Kasi nga, yung purpose mo to sell or to repurchase or to buy, to sell or to buy in the near term. So, dili nimo patulugon og 5 years bago ka mag-buy and sell. Ganun sa stock market di ba? Unless if you really want to invest in the equity shares of the company. Pero most of the enthusiasts in the stock market, ginabantayan lang yun nato na saka naog sa ato ang kwarta. So, it is a current asset or saka naog sa fair value. Now, what is an equity investment at fair value through OCI? Okay. Now, PFRS 9 provides that you can make irrevocable election to present in OCI subsequent changes in fair value of equity instrument that is not held for trading. So, ganito lang yun. Wala kasi akong paper. Saan manin ako pag-explain? Wait. Di ba na may whiteboard something ang... Ayan. Open ako ng board. Ayan. Makita niyo po ba yung board? Wala kasi akong stylus. Sorry po. Eto. Sige. So it's like this. If you have an equity instrument. Sige, just bear with me. Can you see it? Hello? I shared the jumper with the meeting. Can you see it?
Hindi, ma'am.
Ay, dili.
Wala.
Sige, ako na lang. I will share my whole screen. Sige, share ko na lang akong screen nang makita nyo. Ayan. I'm presenting already. Ayan, nakita nyo na. Sige, sabta. So, wala akong stylus ha. Mouse lang niya akong ginagamit. So, please bear with me. So, magbuhat ang diagram para hindi naman siya mas madali, pero mas summarize. Eto, meron na. Nakikita nyo na ba?
Wala pa, ma'am.
Wala, ma'am.
Bakit? Wala, Jude. Ay, ayan. Sige. I understand. Eto, nakikita na ba?
Yes, ma'am, yes.
Okay, yes. Sige. So, ganito yon. Equity instrument. Ayan. So, kung imuhang equity instrument is held for trading. Okay, trading ha. Sabi ng standard, it is required. It is required na ilagay sa fair value through P&L. Required yon. Pero kung ang imuhang equity instrument is non-trading, sabi ni standard, pwedeng ilagay sa ibang classification. Specifically, fair value. Okay, fair value Wait na lang. Fair value through OCI. You have the option. Hindi required. Option yon. Nahirapan ako. Siguro next time magamit kong phone. Okay. Option yon. Pwede din na FVPL. Okay? Option din yon. Ito yung general rule. Sige, lagay ko na lang rule. General rule. FVPL or fair value through OCI kung non-trading imuhang equity investment. But if your equity investment is trading, wala kang option. Fair value through PNL yon. Always. What do you have to remember? Ay, di ni siya ma-scroll. Mao na gid ni siya kadako, 'di ba? Congrats. Di na nagkasya. So, i-take note na lang ninyo. So, if you want para mas magets ninyo ang diagram, take note nyo na lang. Hindi ko na siya ma-add kasi hindi ko na ma-scroll. Or else, kailangan kong pumunta sa kabilang page which makes the diagram very, hindi na siya maintindihan. So, ganito yon. Pag ang imuhang equity instrument na non-trading, gibutang nimo sa fair value through OCI, you have to remember this. First, dili nimo siya pwedeng i-reclassify to P&L. Pag sinabing reclassify, di nimo pwede ibalhin, di nimo pwedeng ibutang sa profit or loss. Next, dito yon ha. Yan. First, cannot be reclassified to P&L. Isulat nyo na lang kung nagte-take note kayo. Pangalawa, ma'am, kung dili siya pwede ibutang sa P&L pag mag-reclassify, asan ako siya pwede ibutang? Idiretso daw nato siya sa shareholders equity. Ma'am, unsa nga specific na account? Kasi wala namang account na shareholders equity, right? Tama ba? Yes. Wala tayong account na shareholders equity. Label lang to sa taas. That's the major, the mother account. Pero wala tayong account title na shareholders equity. So, ma'am, kung ibutang sa shareholders equity, anong specific account? Ilagay daw natin sa retained earnings. First, cannot be reclassified to P&L. Second, reclassify only to shareholders equity, specifically retained earnings account. And lastly, the total change in fair value appears in the statement of changes in equity. This is the difference between FVOCI and FVPL. Kasi yung total change in fair value sa financial assets sa FVPL, hindi mo yun makikita sa statement of changes in equity na isang label talaga doon. Hindi mo yun makikita kasi naka-PNL nga siya, doon siya sa income statement. Doon siya sa kabilang statement. Pero pag OCI, makikita mo yung total change of fair value, the first purchase or the day kung kanus-ani mo siya gi-purchase, hangtod sa kung kanus ka nag-report of financial statement, kung pila ang change sa fair value ana nga time, makita nimo sa statement of changes in equity. Okay? So, ganun yun. Now, let's proceed. Tanaw na to kung ato ba itong makita dali atong gipang discuss. Yes, andito po yun. So, ayan, retained earnings. Hindi mo pwedeng ilagay sa OCI kung held for trading. Andun din yun. Dun sa left na arm sa atong diagram. Okay? And if it is held for trading, any changes in fair value, of course, andun sa P&L. So, debt investment at amortized cost. So, this is the last item before we proceed to the illustrations. So, na-discuss na nato ang fair value through P&L, right? Diba kaning tulo man to, ang subsequent measurement. Na-discuss na nato ni, especially the trading securities, and unsa tong uban pa na mga securities or investments nga pwede natong ibutang sa P&L. We also discussed the OCI. Ayan, ito. Equity investment at OCI. And last one, we're going to discuss amortized cost. The theories behind. Debt investment at amortized cost. Ilalagay lang daw natin si investment at amortized cost kung na-meet ang dalawang condition na to. Hindi pwedeng isa lang ha, dapat dalawa. First, the business model is to hold financial asset in order to collect contractual cash flows. Wala yan dun sa equity investment eh. Sa equity investment, nag-invest ka sa company, nagpalit kang shares para maging shareholder. So, unsa nga pamaagi lang ka makadawat og kwarta or any benefit, dividends, right? Or kung mag-liquidate ang company na kay part sa ilahang asset. Pero ang debt investment, makadawat kag cash because it is based on your contract. Andun sa contract that you will receive cash, and that cash na marireceive mo is actually a payment of principal and interest dun sa perang pinautang mo sa kabilang kumpanya. Okay? So, nag-invest ka sa company because you want to receive cash in the near future as payment of the principal and interest na pinautang mo sa kanila. So, that is why it is called debt investment. Now, debt investment at fair value through OCI. Pwede din na ang debt investment hindi siya amortized cost kundi OCI. When? When will this be qualified? If both of these conditions are met, the same gihapon kaso nadugang lang ang by selling the financial asset. So, kadto nga purpose, kadto kong gi-mention ganina, to collect contractual cash flows by payment of principal and interest plus pwede po by selling the financial asset. Pwede ka nga maka-gain o benefit or ginansya by selling the financial asset. So, kung naan ang tulo, then you could classify the financial asset or the debt investment at fair value through OCI. Okay? So, ang debt investment at amortized cost, wala kay intention nga ibaligya siya. Okay? Debt investment at amortized cost, wala dun sa business model mo, wala kang intention na ibenta siya. Gusto lang nimo humanon ang tibuok term sa contract na magsige lang kag dawat og kwarta. Contractual cash flows. But, if you have the intention that maybe pwede pud nimo siya mabaligya at some future time, then pwede nimo siya ibutang sa fair value through OCI. Pwede ka nga mo receive og kwarta through principal and interest payment, or pwede pud nga imong ibaligya ang investment, debt investment. So if that's the case, pwede mo siyang ilagay sa fair value OCI. Okay? Nadugang lang na nga condition. So, although we're going to discuss this naman sa next na mga chapters. So, here is a summary of the measurement rules. Ito din yung sinabi ko kanina about held for trading. Kailangan fair value through fair value P&L. Yung ginawa natin sa Jamboard, sa whiteboard. Not held for trading. So, pwede siyang OCI, pwede po siyang fair value P&L. And all other assets or investments in quoted equity, pwedeng sa P&L by default. Diba, pag wala tayo laing kabutngan, pwede na ito ibutang sa P&L. And the same goes with our debt investment. So, kung held for trading, equity man na or debt, basta makakita gani kag for trading, ayaw pagduha-duha, ibutang na sa P&L. And the rest of what we have discussed earlier. So, ano po ba tong fair value? Fair value is actually the price that would be received to sell an asset, or to boil it down, mao ni siya ang presyo nga willing si buyer muhatag o willing si buyer mo dawat in an orderly transaction or in an arm's length transaction. So kung naay price nga willing si seller mo dawat pero dili willing si buyer nga mopalit, then hindi po yan siya fair value. So, for example, bugas. So, of course, willing kayo si seller nga mobaligya sa bugas o bali 100 ang kilo, pero hindi naman willing si buyer. Like, hello, sino ba namang bibili ng 100 pesos per kilo na bigas sa ngayon? So, hindi yun siya ang fair value. Pero pag sinabi natin 46, 48, 50, ayan, negotiable na mga price, yan yung fair value ng bigas as of the moment in the active market. So, yan yung tinatawag natin na fair value. Fair from the word itself na fair, ayan, fair on the part of the buyer, fair din sa part ng seller. Quoted price, so, yan. I think understandable naman siya pag binasa natin. Gain and loss of financial asset at fair value. So, ito, theories lang din to lahat. And all of these will be applied if we're going to discuss the illustration. But instead of discussing the illustration, let's go to your assignment. Okay. So far, may tanong po ba? Ay, dito nga pala. Huwag mahihiyang magtanong kung may right med ba nito. Ato ang next na topic about equity instruments. Actually, some are just a review of our corporation accounting. Corporate accounting. Corporation accounting. Diba? Parang review lang siya. Yung mga dividends, yung split, split up, split down, may mga items lang doon na bago. Gilibog-libog jud ta. Okay? This time, I am sharing the assignment that I gave you last time, the Excel file or the Google Sheet. Can you see it or do I have to zoom it in para mas maklaro ninyo? Kasi I think it's very small. Ay, parang wala. Okay lang? Okay na? Maklaro ra? Or kailangan kong i-zoom in? Hello? Hello?
Okay lang, ma'am.
Andyan pa ba kayo?
Okay.
Papa-activity na naman ako ngayon. Tulog na naman kayo. Hello? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Ay,
Okay lang, ma'am.
ako ang
Laro siya, ma'am.
kadungog. Wait. Ay, ako na naman ang may problema. Sige nga. Ulitin natin. Hello?
Hello, dear.
Hindi ko na naman marinig. Ako si Arlie. Nagsasalita. Check mic test. Ayan.
1, 2, 3.
Ayan. Thank you, thank you. Madungganan ako ang music ni mo ever. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, everyone. Sige, okay lang ni or do I have to zoom in?
Zoom gamay, ma'am. Zoom
okay.
gamay.
Okay, gamay. Just let me know kung okay na ba. Ay, amang zoom ani. Ayan. Kulang pa ba?
Okay na, ma'am.
Okay na. Sige.
Okay na, ma'am.
Okay na di ay. Dito ko na lang ilalagay sa kabila. Huwag na sa kabilang sheet para dili dugay. Diri na lang sa other part, sa blank space, ang answers. Okay? So, journal entries. Dali lang. Ato lang kuwaon ang difference between the fair market value as of the moment ug ang iyahang fair market value or carrying amount recently. Ingana lang, di ba? So, we are required to prepare journal entries. Yes. So, number 1, the entity carried the following securities in December 31, 2019. So, if you could see, gipalit na to sa stock market, for example, ang kaninga mga shares at a cost of 830,000. But sabi pa dito, template company provided the following with respect to marketable equity securities, okay, equity investments, held for trading. So, pag held for trading, wala tayong ibang option kundi ilagay sa fair value through P&L. So, originally, nagkaroon tayo ng journal entry na trading securities, and let's say cash. Hindi ito kasali ha. Pinakita ko lang kung anong possible na entry at the beginning. Trading securities at the amount of 830,000. Ayan. So please bear with me, dili kay ko hasa aning Google Sheet. I'm used with the Excel. So ayan. Ay, hindi pa pala yan number 1. Original, ano pa lang to? Original or the first entry. But entry number 1, ito yung requirement talaga. First, we are going to adjust the fair market value or the carrying amount of the security. So, nag-change siya from 830 na original price na pagbili natin. On December 31, 2019, naging 770. So, bumaba, right? So, kung na lang ilagay na 1, lagay ko na lang 12/31/2019. On 12/31/2019, bumaba. So, nagkaroon tayo ng unrealized loss. And since this is held for trading, ang unrealized loss na ito is mapupunta sa income statement. So, kanang ginaingon nga P&L, profit or loss, that's the other way of saying income statement. So, dun siya mag-a-appear. This is part of our other expense. Okay? And for our credit, of course, kasi nga, lumiit yung amount, ng carrying amount ng trading securities natin, lalagay natin sa credit. And that is 830,000, bumaba 770, so that is 60,000 debit. Next, for June 30, ayan, wala man lang nakaabot og isa ka tuig, so that is June 30, 2020, after 6 months, atong gibaligya. Siguro na feel na nato nga murag di na gyud ta makabawi. Okay? From 200 ning naog siya 40, tama? 160, and then feeling nato din nato kabawi. So gibaligya na lang nato 140. So wa na nato gihulat na mas masakitan pa ta. Gi-let go na nato siya. So in letting it go, we received cash of 140 in exchange of our trading securities. So, gi-let go na nato si B. Buti nga si B at hindi si X. Ni-let go na natin si trading securities. B, ang iyahang carrying amount is kaning latest. Okay? Hindi po yung old. So, that's 160. So, kung 160 siya sa tuang books, gibaligyag 40, then therefore, there is a loss of 20,000. And this time, this is a realized loss. Hindi siya unrealized. Loss on sale of trading securities. So, kaning unrealized loss, ba't siya tinawag na unrealized? Kasi we still have the hope na basin deg musaka pa siya later. So, hindi pa natin siya na-realize kasi andyan pa rin naman yung equity sa atin. Okay? Andyan pa rin sa portfolio natin yung trading securities. So, hindi mo pa ma-feel na may loss talaga. But later on, nung binenta mo na, ayun, na-feel mo na talaga na may loss. So, tawag mo doon, loss on sale of trading securities, like what's happening. So, next, after ilang months again, so that's 12/31/2020, hindi natin binenta yung iba, we are still hoping na basig makabawi ta, musaka gyapon ng price. But on December 31, 80 na lang ang atuang A, ordinary. So that is 80, diri lang sa nato i-solve. 80 pesos times 4,000 shares for our A. We have 320,000. And then for C, we have 180 times 2,000 shares. And that is a total of 680,000. Tama ba? Okay. That's a total of 680,000. Compare it with the recent carrying amount. That's 300 and 310. So that is, ayan, 610,000. Compare it with 680. Therefore, ning saka, ayun, nakabawi din. So, nakabawi man ta, ni saka man, pilay saka gani? 680 securities. 680 minus 610, that's 70. Nisaka siya and we call it unrealized gain. Hindi pa natin na-realize. So, unya na siya ma-realize kung mabaligya na ang securities. That's 70. So, this unrealized gain will become part of our income statement as other income. Okay? So, P&L gihapon siya or through profit and loss or income statement. So, naka-credit kasi gain, and then yung loss naman naka-debit kasi expense yan. Ito, naka-credit kasi income. Okay? So, these are going to be the journal entries that we will need for template company. So, I think that's going to be 3 entries only for your problem 1 assignment. Let's proceed to problem number 2. So, please assess as well kung assess nyo din kung tama ba yung mga sinagot nyo sa assignment. Eto, how about this one? Do I still need to zoom in or choco na? Problem 2.
Okay na, ma'am. Okay na.
Okay na. So, this is fair financial asset at fair value through OCI. Okay? How do you read this one? Aborigine or aborigine? Char, social. Basta, the company. The company reported the following accounts in the Statement of Financial Position on January 1, 2019. Ayan. We are required to, first, gawa tayo ng entry sa December 31. Ayan, may clue ka na. Decrease in value. So, ibig sabihin may loss. Sinabi niya. Ayan, may clue ka tuloy. And then, we're going to prepare entry as well, July 1. And lastly, for December 31, 2020. Or basically, lahat ng transaction during the year. So, eto, January 1, 2019, 4 million. Ayan. Yung market adjustment for unrealized loss na 500, makikita mo din siya sa OCI. This gives us the idea, kahit wala pa yung label na yan, this will give us the idea na yung ginamit niya na classification is financial asset at fair value through OCI at hindi P&L. Okay? Kasi, andyan mo makikita ang total change in fair value. Di ba gingon na ako to kaganina sa tong whiteboard nga, if you are using or if you are classifying your equity instrument in OCI, ang total change in fair value makita nato sa statement of changes in equity. And basically, your equity forms part sa inyuhang statement of financial position. So, ito yon. Ibig sabihin, OCI ang ginamit niya. Ayan, may clue ka din. So, yun. Kahit walang label, malalaman natin. Now, if OCI ang ginamit niya, kung sa ganitong kailangan na ito hinumdaman, we cannot reclassify it to P&L. If we are going to reclassify, pag naato na siyang nabaligya, diretso sa retained earnings. Bear that in mind. Now, an analysis of the investment portfolio revealed at year-end, ito, nag-change na from 4 million, di ba, that's originally 4 million. Bumaba, naging 3.4 million. Okay. And that is requirement number 1. So, lagay natin December 31, 2019. What happened here? Ay, ano ba? And kasi nahihirapan ako sa Excel. Next time din ako magamit ng Google Sheet. Okay, that's 12/31/2019. May pagbaba ng fair value na nagaganap. So, this is unrealized loss. Hindi naman to trading, di ba? So, lagay na lang nating OCI. Unrealized loss, papunta yan sa OCI, hindi yan papunta ng profit or loss. And, hindi nga kasi tayo trading. So, let's just say this is financial asset at fair value OCI. Okay? Hindi trading securities. And this is in the amount of that's 4 million minus 3.4. So that is 600, if I'm not mistaken. 600. Okay. Now, on July 1, dito tayo. July 1, 2020. The ABC share was sold for 2.1 million. Ayan, nawalan na siya ng pag-asa. Binenta niya na. Pero at least, wala siya nalugi, right? ABC was 2.5, bumaba ng 2.1, pero nabenta niya naman ng 2.5, bumaba, naging 2 million, binenta ng 2.1, so nagkaroon din siya ng gain eventually. So, naka-receive ng cash, that's 2.1. And then, eliminate the asset, that's financial asset at fair value OCI, and that's 2 million. That is based on the recent carrying amount or the recent fair value. And the gain. So we have gain. Nga pala. Hindi na nga pala tayo magigain, right? Bakit wala nang gain? Kasi yung gain on sale, papunta yun kay profit or loss. And sabi pa, na pag gumamit tayo ng OCI, wala tayong ilalagay kay profit or loss, kundi ilalagay kay shareholders' equity in the form of retained earnings. Tama? This is one thing that we should be reminded of every time we are using OCI. Walang gain on sale or loss on sale. So, any gain on sale or loss on sale, diretso kang retained earnings. And eventually, kaning unrealized loss, nga atong gi-record previously, ato po siyang i-transfer kang retained earnings. So, paano natin siya ito-transfer? Eliminate mo lang. Kung naka-debit doon, credit mo na si unrealized loss dito. Unrealized loss OCI. Nganong kailangan naman nato siya i-eliminate? Kasi nabenta mo na. Ibig sabihin, na-realize mo na. So, kung na-realize mo na, i-transfer mo kay retained earnings. But the question is how much? Is it the whole 600,000? No. Kung ano lang ang applicable sa share na binenta mo. So, that is 2.5 minus 2 million. The loss is just 500,000. Again, wag mong i-reclassify lahat kasi hindi naman yun lahat kay ABC. Magtira ka din naman dun sa iba. Diba? Share. Next is we're going to prepare journal entry for 12/31/2020. And there is a change. Ang atong XYZ from 1.2 ni naog og 1 million. So that's loss nga 200. RST 200 ning naog og 150. That's another loss of 50. Therefore, we have another unrealized loss of 250,000. And of course, FA FVOCI gihapon for 250,000 still. So that will be our entries for the year from 2019 to 2020. That's problem number 2. And problem number 3 is about equity securities already, or equity investments, which we're going to discuss on chapter 16. Before we proceed, any question